North Korea vs USA live, latest updates as Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump threaten war. North Korea has accused South Korea of a reckless military provocation after the South fired warning shots at the border. As America's military show of force in the region continues, here are live updates on tensions between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. South Korea fired the shots at the border earlier this week after detecting an object flying across from North Korea. Seoul later identified it as balloons carrying propaganda leaflets. The North's General Staff today dismissed Seoul's claim as fabrication and accused South Korea of provocation and actually firing machine gun rounds at a flock of birds. The latest standoff comes just after it emerged that Donald Trump told his Philippine counterpart that he sent two nuclear submarines towards the Korean peninsula. North Korea has carried out two ballistic missile tests this month as Kim Jong-un's regime tries to develop nuclear weapons capable of striking America. 8:40 MBST, North Korea has threatened to wipe the U.S. off the face of the earth in a propaganda news article. Kim Jong-un's despot regime mocked Donald Trump, warning "Don't dream, silly dream," and saying that the U.S. should be punished for its sly trick of using spies to infiltrate Pyongyang. The article continued, "The U.S. is, indeed, a den of evils that should be wiped off the face of the earth as early as possible, as it is openly pursuing the policy of state-sponsored terrorism by unhesitatingly resorting to hideous provocation, far from learning a lesson from the failed DPRK policy of its predecessors. The U.S. should understand that its desperate intelligence operation against the DPRK will only bring destruction to it. The foolhardy operations against the supreme leadership of the DPRK and its strategic facilities only bring to light the wretched plight of the U.S., which has sustained disgraceful defeats only in the showdown with the DPRK. 2 a.m. BST. The U.S. has announced it will attempt the first-ever intercept of an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, as North Korea continues to improve its military capability. The ground-based mid-course defense, GMD, interceptor will be test-fired next Tuesday from the Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. Friday, May 26. 20:24 p.m. BST. Donald Trump issued a stern warning to Kim Jong-un as he agreed with the Japanese Prime Minister to expand sanctions on North Korea. Speaking after meeting with Shinzo Abe, the leader said, "We'll be discussing many things, including of course North Korea, which is very much on our minds." 7:35 p.m. BST, a North Korean defector spoke to NPR, to recall the hard life within the hermit communist state. Lee So-yeon joined the North Korean army in 1992 and served mostly behind a desk for almost a decade. "All of us soldiers had to march," she said. "It unified us, and showed off our strength to the outside world." Ms. Lee also said she witnessed instances of sexual abuse and violence against female soldiers during her time in the army. She finally managed to escape in 2008. After being imprisoned and tortured for trying to sneak across the border. "I was shocked by freedom, that I didn't need permission to do anything," she recalled. "I couldn't believe there was hot water, hair dryers. I could vote for whomever I wanted. And all the food." 6 p.m. BST, British Prime Minister Theresa May spoke at a G7 press conference where she underlined her commitment to peacefully resolving tensions in the Korean peninsula. The leaders were united in their condemnation of North Korea's continued nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles tests, Ms. May said. "We agreed to continue to increase pressure on Pyongyang as we work to secure a peaceful resolution in the region." 5:05 p.m. BST, the North Korean masterminds behind the regime's rocket launches have been revealed to the West. They are Ri Pyong-il, a former Air Force general, Kim Jong-sik, a veteran rocket scientist, and Jang Chang-ha, the head of a weapons development and procurement center. Photographed on various occasions with Kim Jong-un, the three men often exchange smiles and hugs with their beloved leader. Rather than going through bureaucrats, Kim Jong-un is keeping these technocrats right by his side, so that he can contact them directly and urge them to move fast, said An Chan-il, a former North Korean military officer. It reflects his urgency about missile development. 3:55 p.m. BST, President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe have agreed to extend sanctions against North Korea. The two leaders are attending the G7 summit in Taormina, Italy, today and had a one-on-one meeting. President Trump and Prime Minister Abe agreed their teams would cooperate to enhance sanctions on North Korea, including by identifying and sanctioning entities that support North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear programs, the White House said. They also agreed to further strengthen the alliance between the United States and Japan, to further each country's capability to deter and defend against threats from North Korea, the statement added. 2:45 p.m. BST, Russia and China have agreed that the threat of North Korea's nuclear arsenal should not be an excuse to mount anti-missile systems in the Korean peninsula. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov spoke of the issue today, referring to the U.S. THAAD system installed in South Korea. Both Russia and China are in favor of dismantling Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal, but are unhappy with the measures taken by the U.S. 2:10 p.m., Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is attending the G7 summit, said he will bring up the North Korean problem during the discussions. The issue of North Korea is a grave threat not only to East Asia but also to the world, Mr. Abe told reporters before leaving Tokyo. 1:35 p.m. BST, U.S. President Donald has arrived in Taormina, Italy, for the G7 summit. Mr. Trump tweeted, "Just arrived in Italy for the G7. Trip has been very successful. We made and saved the USA many billions of dollars and millions of jobs. Getting ready to engage G7 leaders on many issues including economic growth, terrorism, and security." White Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the president will pull aside UK Prime Minister Theresa May for a chat this afternoon. 1 p.m. BST, China is realizing it is running out of time to rein in North Korea's nuclear program and is open to further sanctions against Pyongyang, claims a member of the U.S. Department of State. Susan Thornton, the acting Assistant Secretary for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, told press in Beijing that China understood the U.S. view of North Korea as an urgent time-limited problem set. So they know now that they don't have, I think, as much time to try to bring the North Koreans to the table to get their calculus changed and get them to the negotiating table, she said. And I think that has lent some urgency to their measures. Noon BST, Donald Trump told Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe that North Korea is a big problem, but assured him that the issues would be resolved. "It is very much on our minds. It's a big problem, it's a world problem and it will be solved. At some point it will be solved. You can bet on that," Trump said ahead of the G7 summit. North Korea's nuclear arsenal is a growing concern and experts believe Kim Jong-un could have missiles capable of hitting America sometime after 2020. 8:00 MBST, Donald Trump has a four-point plan for North Korea that does not include a military option, a South Korean lawmaker has told Seoul's Yonhap news agency. The U.S. president has reportedly signed a report which calls for a four-pronged attack, not recognizing North Korea as a nuclear state, imposing every possible sanction and pressure, not seeking a regime change and resolving the problem with dialogue. Meanwhile, China has tightened security controls at its border with North Korea as part of UN sanctions designed to block Pyongyang's nuclear program. U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State Susan Thornton told reporters in Beijing that China has increased border and customs inspections and has beefed up policing on the border. 4 a.m. BST, experts claim that the masterminds behind Kim Jong-un's missile program are former Air Force General Rip Yonkel, veteran rocket scientist Kim Jong-sik, and Jang Chang-ha, the head of the North Korean Weapons Development and Procurement Center. 1 a.m. BST, the U.S. state of Hawaii have produced a plan of action and milestones for a new ballistic missile defense initiative in response to North Korea's threats. A Hawaiian state official described nuclear contingency plans as formidable and critical to the survival of our 1.4 million residents and visitors in the unlikely event of a nuclear detonation. The plans include reviewing existing procedures for mass casualty and fatality management, in addition to conducting in-service training for key staff regarding weapons effects. 12 a.m. BST. Republican and Democratic lawmakers have introduced a bill to U.S. Congress that seeks to ban Americans from traveling to North Korea as tourists. Democrat Adam Schiff and Republican Joe Wilson presented the North Korea Travel Control Act on Thursday in response to the detention of at least 17 Americans in North Korea in the past decade. They claim North Korea has a record of using detained Americans to extract high-profile visits from the United States, with which it has no formal diplomatic relations. Thursday, May 25. 7:50 p.m. BST, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is making an official visit to Russia on Thursday and Friday, to meet with his counterpart Sergei Lavrov. North Korean tensions are expected to be the major topic of conversation, as both countries maintain an agenda on the regime's nuclear capabilities. This news comes 2 months after China stopped its imports of coal from North Korea, Kim Jong-un's major source of income. Coal exports make up 40% of the hermit state's total exports, mostly to China. 6:50 p.m. BST, a U.S. lawmaker submitted a bill today which would put a strict ban on travel and tourism to North Korea. The North Korea Travel Control Act proposed by Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and Republican Joe Wilson would block U.S. tourists from visiting the hermit state. Other tourists would have to obtain permission through a U.S. Treasury licensing system, Channel News Asia reports. Tourist travel to North Korea does nothing but provide funds to a tyrannical regime, that will in turn be used to develop weapons to threaten the United States and our allies, Mr. Wilson said in a statement. Worse, the regime has routinely imprisoned innocent foreign civilians and used them as bargaining chips to gain credibility with the West. We should not enable them any longer, he added. 6:15 p.m. BST, a former chief of the U.S. National Intelligence believes it would be unwise of Donald Trump to attack North Korea. Admiral Dennis Blair, former director of National Intelligence, told a group of Harvard students there is no easy way to disable Kim Jong-un's nuclear arsenal. If I were to run the national intelligence again and the president comes to me and says, "Here is General Jim Mattis' strike plan and can you ensure me that this will take out of all the North Korean nuclear capabilities?" It won't be easy to say yes, Mr. Blair said, according to the South China Morning Post. These views were mirrored by Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, who recently admitted that a fight with the communist regime would be a tragedy on an unbelievable scale. 4:20 p.m. BST, Donald Trump reaffirmed his commitment to the fight against terrorism in the wake of the Manchester bombing. Speaking at the NATO summit, Mr. Trump said the U.S. and its allies would drive out militants and encouraged all nations to do the same. We will never waver in our determination to defeat terrorism and achieve lasting security, prosperity and peace, Mr. Trump said, after unveiling a September 11 memorial. Terrorism must be stopped or, the horror you saw in Manchester and so many other places will continue forever, he added. 3:15 p.m. BST, President Trump is attending a NATO summit today. Mr. Trump has criticized most of his NATO allies for not contributing enough to defense spending. I am happy that all NATO member states will underline that NATO is the central pillar of our common security, that we feel united in solidarity for our common security, Angela Merkel said ahead of the summit. 12:45 p.m. BST, China has urged Japan to act cautiously after authorities in Tokyo said they were collaborating with the U.S. on new missile defense radars. Speaking at a press briefing, Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman Ren Guoqiang said the issue of anti-missile defenses was a matter of trust. Especially because of historical reasons, relevant moves by Japan in the military and security field have always attracted close attention from its Asian neighbors and the international community, Mr. Ren said. Japan should act cautiously on the anti-missile issue, he added. 2:30 a.m. BST, a U.S. Navy warship has sailed within just 12 miles of an artificial island built up by China. The news come after the U.S. had said it would be allying with the nation over the threat of North Korea. An international expert claimed the U.S. president is only using his feud with North Korea to launch a surprise attack on China. James Petras said, Washington's strategy is designed to contain and influence China if possible, and in extreme basis for launching a nuclear attack on China. I think the pretext of attacking North Korea is simply an excuse to build up U.S. military capabilities for a nuclear attack. Wednesday, May 24. 10 p.m. BST, China is losing patience with North Korea and is concerned Kim Jong-un will hinder their rise to superpower status. Harvard University history professor Adarn Westad said alarm bells were ringing in Beijing due to the increasingly erratic nature of their hermit state. He said, great powers, particularly rising great powers, cannot easily tolerate friends and allies getting in the way of larger pictures. This is what I think has changed with regard to the relations. Professor Westad said relations had never been as bad as they are today, and they seem to be getting worse very quickly. 9:30 p.m. BST, a leaked transcript of a call between Donald Trump and Filipino leader Rodriguez Duterte reveals the U.S. president described Kim Jong-un as a madman with nuclear weapons who could not be let on the loose. Mr. Trump allegedly told Mr. Duterte in the April 29 call that the U.S. would take care of North Korea, and had a lot of firepower in the region, although it did not want to use it. A senior U.S. official said the Trump administration did not dispute the accuracy of the transcript and declined to comment further. Mr. Trump requested Mr. Duterte's help in pressing China, North Korea's neighbor and only major ally, on the need for it to help rein in the North Korean leader. He said, "We can't let a madman with nuclear weapons let on the loose like that. We have a lot of firepower, more than he has, times 20, but we don't want to use it." 6:46 p.m. BST, Donald Trump's decision to send thousands of troops to Afghanistan has been delayed by a heated debate in the White House. As Mr. Trump arrives at the NATO summit tomorrow, his administration is split on the war in Afghanistan, according to the New York Times. Jack Keane, a retired Army Vice Chief of Staff, said, "The questions they have to ask are, is that additional force decisive? Are we going to win? Can we force a political settlement?" 5:20 p.m. BST, President Donald Trump has been welcomed in the Vatican by Pope Francis, in the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders. A statement issued by the Vatican said Mr. Trump and the Pope discussed issues around healthcare, education and the promotion of peace in the world. Following the meeting, Mr. Trump tweeted, "Honor of a lifetime to meet His Holiness Pope Francis. I leave the Vatican more determined than ever to pursue peace in our world." Pope Francis reportedly gifted Mr. Trump with a copy of his 2015 encyclical on climate change. "He is something," Mr. Trump remarked. 3:58 p.m. BST, North Korea's weapon arsenal could contain up to 400 drones carrying chemical weapons, a regime defector has claimed. Jin Myung-han, who defected from the communist state in 2015, said the drones are being kept underground to avoid detection. He said, "I was surprised to see that people from the Korean Workers' Party came and mounted something that appeared to be biological and chemical weapons on the drones. They conducted an experiment to spray chemical or biological agents over the mountains and fields nearby. I went to the mountain afterward to check and found all animals dead, although plants survived." 2:50 p.m. BST, China has warned today that no one had the right to bring chaos to the Korean peninsula, a day after it called for UN sanction against the North Korean regime. No matter which party it is, no one has the right to bring war and chaos upon the peninsula, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told reporters. Mr. Yi further said that anyone who did that would bear the historical responsibility. The U.S. has been trying to persuade China to help rein in Pyongyang, as Kim Jong-un continues to defy the UN resolutions. 12:18 p.m. BST, President Donald Trump told the Philippine president he has sent 2 nuclear submarines to North Korea, the New York Times has said. Mr. Trump said a major conflict with Kim Jong-un was possible, but he wanted to resolve the conflict diplomatically. "We have 2 submarines, the best in the world," Mr. Trump said, according to the newspaper. "We have 2 nuclear submarines, not that we want to use them at all." The report is based on a Philippine transcript of a call between Mr. Trump and President Rodrigo Duterte. 6:15 am BST, North Korea has been caught flying balloon packages of propaganda across the border, the South's defense ministry has said. The Ministry of National Defense said there were actually around 10 flying objects detected close the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, and several of them crossed it. The ministry's spokesman Moon Sang-jun said, "Judging from the results of an analysis, we believe there is a low possibility that the objects were drones." He added that they are presumed to have been balloons carrying propaganda leaflets from the north.